All right, here we are with another episode of Escape Velocity, jumping right in. And today I am talking with my dear friends, Monica Sanchez and Yianni Mathioudakis, who are also the founders and co-partners of the design studio DEEO, and very fortunate to be working with them right now on things and having worked with them in the past for many years. Monica, Yianni, thank you so much for joining me on this very smooth entry to our podcast. So before we kind of dive into wherever this conversation takes us, which is, thank you guys for being up for essentially a non-formatted podcast. But you get the rough gist. But I'd love for you guys to just talk a little bit about, tell everybody who you are beyond what I've done and what you're up to.
Okay, so we are DEEO. We started this a year ago, the creative studio. It's been a thrill and a blast, and it's just been such an amazing experience. We come from a lot of history with you. We have a great relationship in terms of like creating wonderful work, and I think we're just sort of tapping back into that, and it's been really exciting to partner with you on some things because it feels very natural in some ways. But co-founder of DEEO. I do mostly like strategy work and accounts. And the great thing about this situation is I really get my hands dirty on everything. I can work on the creative stuff. I can work on strategy. I can work, really in anything with Yianni, and that's been really fun.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like you don't realize, how much is involved in running a business until you're actually, in charge. And it's like, now it's not only do the responsibilities that we were doing before, and now it's like maintain the business, handle the administration part of it, set up the bank account, do all the taxes, like all that stuff adds up. But it's all worth it in the end. It's definitely all worth it in the end. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I think everybody should, if they have the desire to do it, and they think they've got the time and can handle the stress, everybody should try being their own boss. And um, it's a great learning experience no matter what happens from it. But I do think that it's a lot, all that little stuff. It is just little stuff. It could be done.
Yeah.
But it does just take up a lot of time. And when you've got kids and, a spouse and friends and just life is happening too.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sometimes the idea of just checking in at 9 and checking out at 5, getting your paycheck, like I get that too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of the things that I've my whole life been kind of really interested in is like, how do you break through barriers? How do you, if you see something that's a problem or you feel like it's holding you back,
Mhm.
identifying it and being self-aware or just aware enough to say like, oh, I feel like that is a blocker for me. That is an obstacle. I think that's the easy part, but what do you do about it? And, I have learned a lot about how to maneuver through those things just by the nature of being a painter, being an artist. I face a blank canvas all the time, but also, that doesn't relate to everything. So in regards to like starting your own company, where did you have to kind of do the biggest pushes? Where were the hardest parts along the way that you had to find a way to like get through it and break
Mhm.
through?
I think one of I can address this, Yianni. For me, I think one of the things, and I'm sure you have, there's probably a long list of things that we could talk through, but for us, I think fortunately we had a really clear vision of not exactly what we wanted to do. There was a really clear vision of what we didn't want to do and sort of, the direction we wanted to head. And we found a lot of inspiration in others, right? So we used a lot of different channels and mediums to kind of define our voice and like the brand that we wanted to represent, right? And I think a lot of that is still evolving. And I think one of the keys for empowering yourself and setting yourself up for success and creating that sort of breakthrough moment is to be really patient, because it does not happen overnight. You know, I
Yeah.
think Yianni and I were incredibly passionate about doing this thing. It takes courage, right? It takes courage to say like, okay, I'm leaving this thing that's pretty stable and has been, you know, pretty consistent over the last few years. I'm kind of walking away from that into the complete unknown.
Yeah.
You know, we were really, really excited and passionate about what we wanted to do, and the reasons behind why we started DEEO were really based in our need as like humans to be creative and find that creative outlet. And so a lot of the work that we do is very much because we're interested in that, and that drives our dedication to this thing that is now our jobs. But I think the idea that patience and really acknowledging the little things are just as important as the big things is really important to have those breakthrough moments, because they don't happen. I mean, people say they happen overnight, and they're, you know, it's like check into the viral thread and like make sure you're doing these things to do the equation, and it's like you could do that and you could be viral for one day and then nobody knows who you are the next.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
us, it's like breakthroughs have to be meaningful and have something tangible that feels right to us. And that, in order to create that experience, it doesn't happen for us like over days or weeks. It's like months.
Yeah. Well, you know, you and Yanni, I want to jump to you really quick, but Monica, I think what you said earlier about you knew what you didn't want to do
Mm-hmm.
is just as important as knowing what you want to do. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget, like, all I knew when I started my first agency was what I didn't want to do, the kind of culture I didn't want, the kind of
Mm-hmm.
clients I didn't want, the kind of boss I didn't want to be, the kind of team actually, the team was the only I had. That's why I took some of the jobs I took early on, was to work with people that I really was excited to work with.
Mm-hmm.
But having that list of things that I knew I didn't like was just as strong of a navigational tool for me as I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I wasn't too sure about anything else except none of this shit.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% agree. We had we felt very confident in the things that we did not want to do or the roads that we did not want to travel, which helped really define and clear a path for where some of that preliminary structure of where we are now. But then we were really able to insert our own creative thought and feelings behind what DEEO is now, and it's it's wild to look back. We did look back, and some of the stuff we're like, I can't believe we wrote like some things down, but it informed who we are in some ways.
Yeah, like
So
you've got to carve out room for what you're going to be to grow.
yeah.
And so by knowing what the weeds are and what to cut out, you know, you have to know what that is so that there's room.
Mm-hmm.
But to expect the room to be filled immediately, that's where you do need the patience. And
Mm-hmm.
you need to like plant seeds and just have confidence that you've given yourself the space and the time
Mm-hmm.
that they can grow. And Yanni, you know, being more of a practicing creative, right? In terms of like you do the design and good Lord, he's frozen again.
He shall return. I was thinking, you know, I know we talked about earlier your idea for like maybe what we wanted to talk through, and I didn't want to spend too much time on it because I think naturally we just like we get into this flow and this rhythm, and our cadence is very natural. Um, but I did think like when I was thinking about breakthroughs, it was really funny. I think one of the things that I was thinking of, I think today, so we had a conversation today, right?
Yeah.
And it was frustrating for me because I felt I wasn't delivering or I was misreading what we had discussed in the plans. And I mean, let's be honest, the things that we talk about, like in general, when you're faced with something that is very challenging, right? It's not a problem. It's something that we go after
Yeah.
collectively we went after this thing, this work, because we knew it wasn't going to be easy, but the payoff for the work that we would create was going to be something really exciting.
Yeah,
And
we like the challenge, we seek it out.
exactly.
But then you keep beating yourself up.
Right. And I think that that's a part that happened today.
I saw.
Yeah. And that's just it. So like, I think that's what, I obviously it was a hard call and it was a hard conversation. And I had to step away and just be like, look, I need to get my thoughts together. But when I revisited, okay, preparing for this conversation, when I sort of was thinking about breakthroughs, like, I'm kind of glad that happened before this conversation, because I think it's really easy to list all of the positive things and like, here's what you need to focus on. And like, of course, people say it's not smooth sailing, right? Anyone who's like, it's easy is full of shit. But finding ways to work through the challenges and the hard times, right? The challenge we seek, right? The challenge we seek because we are actively like, this is not easy. This is not predictable. There is no pattern. There is no checklist. That's us, right? That does not come easy. And the thing is, collectively, we all approach that as like knowing it's going to be a challenge. So we keep an open mind and we don't get stuck in ruts where we're like, this isn't feeling right. I can't keep going. But today that kind of happened, right? Where I was like, this is really frustrating for me. It really doesn't happen all that often. But to to stay focused, to really find that breakthrough, right? Because we're close and it's going to happen. But today was just one of those days where like, you have to acknowledge, in order to stay focused and have that breakthrough moment, you do have to have days like this, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, that was not a great day for me. But I think in order to successfully work through those days, I was like, I'm so glad that happened with these two people, because I didn't have to say anything, right? Like, you all knew like I was not having a good moment, and I can be honest with you about that experience. You can relate to it, you sympathize with it, but you don't belittle it, right? So
No.
finding people that you can have those experiences with, right? Like, you're doing work together and it's great, but you need to find a network. You need to put yourself with people that don't brush off your feelings of that was not a great day, right? And like, that
Totally.
contributes to the breakthrough, right? Like, the breakthrough happens when you surround yourself with people that are like, not only helping get to that point collectively of the breakthrough, but acknowledge when someone's struggling and are like, let's figure this out together. I think
Yeah.
that contributes to the breakthrough moments just as much as like, that was an awesome conversation.
Monica, I think what you said kind of touched upon, I think, a notion a lot of people fall into, or maybe they're always there from the get-go, that like, if we can just get the right check marks like all figured out, then
Mm-hmm.
it'll just be easy and we can just check the marks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So first of all, I think there are people who crave that,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
agreed. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
And need that, and I'm not belittling it at all.
Mm-mm.
Like, if that
Mm-mm.
is you, I understand you, I see you, and
100%.
I get that. And then I think there are also people who think that is the only way to solve a problem, is to establish those check marks so that you don't have to be constantly creating a new route every time.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who does like to face the blank canvas every time
Mm-hmm.
and not be like, oh, I'm going to just repeat that same thing, but it'll just be a slightly different picture. I find that, by not having all the check marks super clearly laid out, that there is more opportunity for exploration, for creativity, but
Mm-hmm.
that also introduces more risk. So,
Yes.
there is, you have to, I think, have a higher tolerance for risk and a higher sense of confidence that it's still going to be great. Like, I have faith,
Mm-hmm.
but that is another level of courage that I think is not about like necessarily starting the company, which takes a tremendous amount of courage, but then to approach creative work from that perspective. Especially, I mean, it's creative services. Like they're going to pay us before we even start. Like with a painting, somebody's actually got to want it and buy it off the wall, but I've already made it. We were talking about, I'm sure you heard bits and pieces, but like as a designer and photographer and, someone that really kind of lives in that creative space and is used to, you got to sit down and start with that blank screen. How do you feel like that idea of courage or knowing what you don't want and that idea of faith, how does that
Yeah.
inform you or not in what you do?
It does a lot, because I feel like it's really easy when we were talking about process to get locked into, this is the way we always do it, and this is the format, and we're going to follow these rules. And when you do that, it might make the project easier to run through, easier to design, probably easier for the client to understand. But all of that at the risk of, I think, like creativity and innovation, right? It's just like kind of like sucks your soul out a little bit. So I
Yeah.
think you have to be okay with being uncomfortable and just knowing that we're going to try some new things. Let's leave it open. We're going to explore, and we're going to be open to conversations of like, if we go down this path, it might not be the right path, and we're going to pivot, but we're okay to pivot. We're not going to just lock in and be like, all right, this is it. So
Yeah.
I think you just got to be open to exploration, and for us, like curiosity and learning. I think when I start a new design, I never want to do the same thing again. So like thinking and brainstorming, like we had a brainstorm today, like what can we do really, and just not get into design yet. Just talk about the ideas, have time to sit with it. And then obviously I do think there's a point where it's like, all right, you do have the blank canvas. You got to get in there. Like you got to start trying these things, because it's easy to talk about stuff forever. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
It's good when you can start reacting. That's
right.
when the conversation starts to get more dynamic.
I agree. Right. It's like when, showed you a couple things and we're like, oh, like, well, that means this, and this might need to shift, and we might need to do this type of thing. So I do think there's a point where it's like, there's ideas and conversations and, places we can go, but sooner or later you got to sit down and just go for it and try it. And like I said, just be ready to pivot and move if you need to.
You know, we all started working together a long time ago in a past life, or what feels like one. And for most of us, and especially for me, when I started my first company and even just got into digital and into interactive design, it was also new. So like there was no process to follow. There was no like, here is how a digital agency does work. We didn't even know what to call it. It was just like, I don't know. It's cool. I have no idea what's happening, but anyone in the world can see it once I figure out how to do it and get it up to whatever that means on the internet. And so there was like, it was baked in that it was all going to be new and creative and innovative. And then, 25 years later, it's sort of like, okay, well, yeah, websites, digital. It's just like another tool in the toolbox. But I feel like a lot of us that came into it early on, there was this spirit of pioneering, this spirit of exploration and innovation. And I remember even like all the early digital agencies, like they all had like their R&D or their lab section or, like sharing their explorations. And that's definitely died off as it's become more commoditized. And like, I love that you guys have spun up, your own sort
We
of
just went up
lab, right?
Yeah.
right. Exactly.
Because you can't all like with some aspects of the business, I think you can't use every client to do your wildest, craziest like experiments on.
Yeah.
It's unethical. But I don't know, like how do you decide, which this probably sound wrong, but like which itch to scratch where?
Yeah. It's yeah. I feel the same as you. Like right now, it's just such a like exciting time, I feel, for design and technology with like AI coming out,
Yeah.
all the new tools for designing, like 3D software and browsers, no code tools like Framer and Unicorn. Like there's so much to play with and explore, where I felt like 5 years ago, everyone was kind of locked into like, this is the framework for designing and building sites. Like
Yeah.
we all do the same thing. And if you want to try 3D, you're going to spend a ton of money and you need to hire a
It
big.
still won't work anyway because nobody will be able to see it on
Right.
the browser or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's just like you said, like we spun up the creative lab. It's kind of our outlet for experimentation and just trying things. Because I think for us, like that's kind of more of the work we want to do. We just want to do really creative, innovative, different work. And, sometimes the clients, don't allow, it's like doesn't fit where we're going with that project, although we always try to inject it. So for now, it's just like, what is I have a mood board in Figma that's just like, if I come across any kind of really cool design that just catches my attention or catches my eye, and social, anywhere, I save it and I put it in this folder of like either things to explore, things to like try to replicate, things to just save. And I'm like, I love this.
Yeah.
Just keep that library, and it comes in handy when there's a project that comes along, and I'm like, I like remember that, and I'm like, there's might be something related to that I can explore. So it's really just whatever kind of at the moment sparks interest. I think of it a little bit like putting in reps at a gym, just like
Yeah.
every day in the morning, try to do something for myself and for DEEO that is, I know, going to be beneficial, and
Yeah.
just do it, try it, learn it, see what I get, and then just keep doing it every day.
It's something I've always really admired about you, and also just found inspiring was you were always progressing. You were always looking. You were always like, um, I mean, and then when you got into CrossFit, like you took the same approach to that, but you already were that kind of person with your own, with work, with design, with creativity in general. And it's amazing to me how many people don't want to put in the work, right? Whether it's, like reading a book, listening to podcasts. I mean, I have bookshelves full of art books, that I'll look to for inspiration for painting, business books, poetry, like whatever, anything that that can keep feeding my mind.
Yep.
And I thought about you, Yianni, when I was interviewing some junior designers recently, and one of the things I asked them was, how do you stay inspired? How do you can ensure that you are professionally evolving if this is your chosen field, right? How do you take charge of that? Because there's so much, right? Like I'll get asked the question, how does a DEEO provide professional development? And I'm just like, I will never say no to any idea you have or any place you want to go or something you want to do. That I will never say no.
Right.
But you've got to want to do it on your own. And it's amazing to me that I will ask designers this question and they'll be like, oh, I don't really I guess I don't really have a good answer for that. I'm like, you don't?
Red flag.
What are you doing? Yeah.
It's a great question to ask, because I feel it's so easy. Like, I went to design school, went to MICA, got my, degree in graphic design, learned a ton, learned about the fundamentals. But if you just stay there, it's just like, I mean, is that it? It's just like you become complacent with that. I don't know. For me, it's just never enough. Like you said, like you have all the books, there's podcasts, there's just like so much, there's just not enough time. It's like, I could do this stuff forever. It's just now finding the time and running a business and like doing all that.
Kids. Yeah. I mean,
Right. Family.
Right. Your time is limited. And so you do have to get kind of ruthless about how you prioritize. But to me, if you're a creative person or you're, and I consider running a business, whether it's a creative business or not, like running a business is creative. I think life is creative. I mean, I think that there's everything is going to change whether you want it to or not. It is a journey. It is a journey of obstacles to be overcome. I mean, life is nothing more than a series of problems to solve until we all reach the unsolvable
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
But until that point, like, our job is to solve them. And there's a great enjoyment and satisfaction and growth in that. But I do think it's a mindset that that requires you to be careful that you don't fall into, like, just living your life with check marks and habits and just like, oh, this is the way it is and it will never change.
Mhm. Mhm.
How do you feel like you actively identify, bad fit clients? Like, can you tell if a client has an idea or wants to talk to you about a project that it's just like, what are your red flags to not get sucked into something like that?
I'll
Mm.
let Monica take that one.
Yeah, we have a pretty strong sense of who's going to fit the like kind of work model that we want. The first year, you know, the first year was really interesting. We learned a lot about ourselves the first year because for the projects going in, we were like, well, we're going to take whatever we can get, right? That's how we're going to get through this
Right.
first year.
Right.
But
Survival.
right. But I think the experience that we've had, and we talked to you about some of these, right? Like where we were like, we're not getting the right feeling, we're not getting the right vibe. And you gave us some questions to ask. I remember like talking to you about a couple in particular, but we said no to clients, like a handful of
That is
clients our
You know
first
how
year.
big that is, though? Like, I would love to get a poll of
Yeah.
other people, either freelancers, contractors, or agency owners who said no to anything in their first year.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
like honestly, it set the tone, right? Because we were like, if we're comfortable saying no year one, month 6, like we're going to be comfortable saying no year 5, year 6, whatever. But it's funny you bring this up because when Yianni was talking about, you know, working with clients and our process is very flexible and fluid to allow Yianni that creativity where when he was like, I'm going to try an idea out and if it doesn't hit, we can pivot, right?
right.
The ideas that he's putting in front of people and like that we talk about and that we present with the clients that say yes are comfortable with him presenting something that's maybe a little bit too far because they know we can scale back or we do have to pivot and we're good for it. And I think that is a client who has confidence in their ability to know who they are, to give feedback, direct feedback, and kind of go with the flow with us the entire time, right? So they have to ask the right questions to us in the beginning. And if they're not listening to our responses, that's a huge red flag for us
Yeah.
because, we try to be incredibly transparent because we know if they don't get the right vibe from us and they don't get the answers they need, then it's probably not a right fit. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But we don't want them to sign up for a project that they feel like they don't know anything about us, the work that we do, or how we do it, because that's just not going to end well for anyone. And so, whenever we've had those inklings or that itch, right, of like, I feel like we've said this 6 different ways. I feel like we're trying to convey to them, like, this is something we want to do, but like, here's what we can do with like the scale of the project. Or like we keep having the same conversations, but the goalposts keep moving, or they just don't really understand the value. I think we talk a lot about finding and communicating the value in design. And that's
Right.
something that clients have a really hard time understanding sometimes. And so all of those things are like big cues for us. And if we get pushback or we're not the vibe, the energy, if it's not syncing in those early stages, then we're usually thinking, okay, this is probably, we're not the right fit for them and they're not the right fit for us.
Yeah. Well, again, I commend you all for just leaning into knowing who you are and having that faith and that courage. When it takes a lot of courage on the client side too, because so much of what we do is invisible. And so like I do think it's communication and trust are like two of the most important things with a client, because you have to trust each other, but the client has to be okay knowing that like there's going to be some risk. There's going to be some things, they might see some things that they don't respond well to, or we might have conversations that they're like, how is this going to turn? How is this going to translate into what we need? And what I think is great is just that, like, if we don't align around everyone's stomach for innovation, everyone's got their sea legs to knowing that, hey, if the waves are too intense, we can correct course. I think that a lot of people have had relationships with outside services providers, especially creative services providers, where they just have had kind of like microwaved bologna handed back to them. So, and I don't.
What everybody, that's all over Yianni's mood board, by the way, that he was talking about microwave bologna.
Microwave bologna.
Which, by the way, I do not know what microwave bologna tastes like.
I don't either, but it sounds awful.
So, yeah. Yeah, reheated bologna. Radiation reheated bologna. Although I don't think bologna is ever really hot to start out with. In any case, I digress. Yianni, why do you think it is that you can end up in a situation where warmed up bologna is the expectation, and if you want more, that you're given a million reasons why that won't work? Is it about like budget? Does it come down to money, and just if you've got people that are like, you don't have the time to reheat this bologna again, or to go make something vegan over there because we've got the extra bologna and we just need to heat it up and make them eat it? Like, what is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I do think budget plays a huge part of it in it for sure. But that being said, we've gotten some smaller budgets to start off, and we've made sure that it's not that, right? It's not, it's so small. So we're going to give you the heated bologna, right? We still want to have that room no matter the scope. So
Yeah.
I also think your point too of like, they probably were burned in the past. So maybe they want a bit more control over the project.
Yeah.
So they look at us as more of like vendors, and just like, you all are just going to basically, we have we know what we want, and can you just do exactly what we say? And that's obviously not a fit for us. Like, we're here for our expertise and our ideas, and we want to be a partnership with all our clients.
Yeah.
But we definitely don't want to be there to just like pixel push around. And
Well, people are messy, right? And we're working with pixels and zeros and ones and things that don't actually exist. And so what we're really left with is a bunch of messy people that have to trust each other and communicate really well and get through all the hurdles of the journey with faith in each other that a good outcome will happen. And I think that it's people that make that so exciting and also so challenging. So, Monica, I'm really curious because, you have decades of project management and account management experience, and now you're running everything. How much do you think the beginning signals about how the project will go, and how much of that signaling is coming from the way that the way that people are communicating versus the parameters of the project? Let's say, like, is the signal or the red flags coming from the way people are talking about the process or the things they're asking for, or is it literally just that sometimes people don't put enough value in something they can't necessarily put their finger on or give a number to?
That's a good question. I think there's like a couple things that popped in my head when you were talking. So like right now, I think for us, because we are very transparent and very honest, and we will immediately call out like, hey, something doesn't feel right. What's going on? Like, we just want to gut check. We actually had one of those calls the other day, right? So like, that's really important that we feel like they feel comfortable with us and they can be honest with us. Early on, I think the biggest sort of like the only time we really haven't had that issue with DEEO, which is great because I think we are very upfront about like the process, and we're very visual too. So I think it helps sort of guide them in that sort of early stage thing where they're not really looking at anything and they're really anxious, right?
Yeah,
So
you guys do. You do keep that pain to a minimum, which I think
right.
is awesome.
Right. So we try to do that, and I think we're receptive to, like, I'm receptive when someone very early on is like, we have to do these things during discovery or strategy. And I'm like, well, we don't technically. If it's necessary
Don't
for
you tell me
you,
what we have to do.
right? Like, trust me, I've been around I've done a couple of these. Like, I don't need to talk, like, like, I get it. I understand. Let's talk about that. Let's unpack that and feel and understand where that like need to have this conversation is like coming from. And
Yeah.
then we work through it. So that's sort of like how we deal with it. And I think that's one of my flags is when people are like, well, we have to do it this way because I just say so. Right. And I'm like, that's kind of a concern.
Mm-hmm.
And we trying to work through that. But I think honestly, you have to be fair to clients too. Right. And I think they're going into this and they're probably putting a lot of money into it. And this is, everybody has a website now. So they've been through this before. Like, we have to put ourselves sometimes in their shoes.
Yeah.
And I think when people come into these engagements and there is this very sort of process heavy approach where process is important, right? No one's saying that. But I think when we're talking about like everything has to be the same way, repeatable process, I think that puts that sort of like puts everyone in a little bit of a mentality of like, we're going through the motions, and clients can pick up on that. And I think not having the energy or the engagement right away with them is a huge turnoff for them, right? Like, they're like, wait a minute, I'm super excited about this. Like, let's get into it. And if you're not meeting them where they are and you're not intelligently engaging with them and having a conversation about why this might not be necessary or why we're recommending this thing, they deserve that.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
if you're not able to provide that, you really need to think about why. And it comes back to one thing that I think is really important for creating breakthrough moments is you are not the smartest person in the room, and you shouldn't be. You should always be open to the fact that you can learn from someone else. And in order to do that, you have to acknowledge that you don't know everything. And that's not a weakness. That's a strength.
Hear, hear.
Well said.
Wow. I feel like we should just drop like
Our mics that weren't.
My book tour is going to be happening in January 2025. I'm kidding. There is no book.
Thank you for coming to Monica's TED Talk. No, I think
You gotta be passionate.
but passionate without the ego, right?
100%.
So it's like
They care about people.
You've got to be okay if the great things that happened weren't all your great things that you brought to the table, and and you've got to be secure enough to be there. That is a rare trait, and I do think there's a level of people try to protect themselves by acting like they know everything and they're going to do everything, and don't you tell me how, and don't you weigh in. And even if you have just an idea and you want to participate, that's threatening. So we're not going to have time for that because you'll just mess it up because you're just some idiot. Like, I do think that's an unfortunately prevalent attitude.
Yeah, I agree.
Amongst, creative people in particular and creative agencies, because I think that there's so much ego and fragility. that is lurking around in there,
I agree. And I think, sorry, I just want to mention this. I want Yianni to chime in, but I think kind of goes back to what you said before, right? Like you and a lot of people like pioneered the unknown like 20 years ago with websites, right? Like there was no playbook, there was no process. It was the Wild West, right? There is nothing wrong with feeling proud about navigating that and owning that and like defining that, right? Like there was no rhyme or reason to how things were created, and then people like you came around and you were like, well, there is probably a method to this madness that opens us up to creativity but still gets things streamlined and can, like, we can do this, right? There is a way to do this in a smart way. And I think that there's like sort of after a while, there's like two sort of like tracks of thought where it was like, okay, we figured this out and like we're digging our heels in and like it is what it is, right? Because like we solved the problem and why change?
Right.
And like
If it ain't
anything
broke,
that's a
don't-
threat to that sort of approach to change how things are like created, I get that sort of like, no, we don't need that, right? Because I get that because you did solve this problem but
Right. Like don't introduce another
right.
track we got to figure out how to
Right.
get
But
down.
I think it goes back to also what you were saying, where it's like, you have to do that in order to stay innovative. Like there are ways to introduce these new ideas and be open to it. Otherwise, you're not solving the problem. You're solving the problem from 20 years ago, not today. And so that willingness to be open-minded is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part, like where Monica was talking about when you don't innovate and you stay stagnant, I think you just become irrelevant if you stay in that path too long. Like things are changing fast. So for us, like AI has been exciting. I know it's kind of a controversial, like there's people on both sides on whether or not it's ethical to use, but for us, it's really just like a creative tool. It's like rarely something that we're just like design this and I'm gonna just put it out there without any input. So it's really just like another creative partner for us to just explore and try and see what we can get. And with AI video to video, I don't know. It's just like so much there, and it's a lot of fun right now for me.
I know. I
Personally.
cursed the day that you told me about Luma.
And the way they set it up though with the credits, like you purchase your pack of credit, and I'm blowing through them so quickly. I'm telling Monica, there it goes.
Like, I gotta update our account again. I'm like, Jesus.
Up it.
It's
like
a
there it
slot
goes.
machine, yeah.
It's like every month.
One more spin.
Yeah.
But don't you think though, like it's such a compounder, right?
Yeah.
Like for a little bit of effort or for one little credit, you don't just get like 90% nothing, 10%, maybe it's pretty cool. Like it's always going to be something interesting. It's always going to be something really well rendered or thought out or interesting. So whether it works or not, like the compounding value of learning to use these tools and the efficiency that they can provide, whether it's as a brainstorm companion or an efficiency tool or some, helping you spell check or proof your writing,
Yeah.
making sure that your perspective or your tone is right. Like to me, it's just a great creative brainstorm partner.
100%. And the fact, for us, there's just two of us, right? DEEO is just two. And the fact that we can utilize AI for all the things you said, like proofreading, meeting notes, like takeaways, not even just design stuff, just, follow up on this meeting and what were your takeaways? Summarize this, like all of that stuff helps us work faster and more efficiently.
Yeah.
Like we are a 10 plus person.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it feels like for us.
Yeah. I mean, it's been so fun working together with you all, just knowing that we're definitely early adopters of new technology and of AI, and finding, ways to collaborate and explore and like brainstorm, and it lends itself to all of that. So it's been a lot of fun just having such a a fun new like sandpit to
Mhm.
play in,
And that's the
basically.
way it should be, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Yeah.
that's what we wanted. This shouldn't feel like the day to day, like, oh, I gotta get up and do my web project. Like for us, it's just exciting every day. And when we get to collaborate and work on projects like this, where we're all on the same page, it's a lot of fun. It's like,
It is. It is a lot of fun. I mean, it doesn't mean that there's not like
you know,
hard times, like Monica's hard time earlier.
It was totally fine. Forget it.
Well,
Never
I
happened.
read somewhere that, it's never a fair fight if you're beating yourself up.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I know we all have very high standards for ourselves.
Yeah.
So we do set ourselves up to be a pretty tough opponent to ourselves.
Mhm.
But I think that nothing meaningful ever came out of like easy, predictable, no
Mm-mm.
problems.
Mm-mm.
Whoever said like I had the most boring, routine, monotonous, exactly what I expected kind of week, and I have had a revelation. Like, and I conquered. I mean, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I
I know.
mean, we all need rest. We all need to recharge. We all need variety. But though I think the way you sink your teeth into a challenge or identify the kind of challenges you want to sink your teeth into, like then you got to sink your teeth in,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and not
Yeah.
try to fit that into your predictable little process because
Mhm.
that's not going to go good.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I feel like our thing is like if we're comfortable, like our motto for the like day one was if we're comfortable, we're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. That was one of the early
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, we have
early
like a
things we figured
tagline
out.
list.
Yeah.
I like it.
Heat up bologna will probably be added to that tagline list.
Actually, I'm put that on the
Get
list.
some merch around that.
Was it microwave bologna?
I haven't really thought about bologna in a long time, let
That was
alone
such a random pull.
you're welcome.
This is our viral moment.
I heard she talks about microwaving bologna.
Yeah.
Crazy.
None of the design stuff.
But yeah, no. So and well, I would also say like to be in a creative collaboration, you've got to feel comfortable letting it rip.
Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah.
I mean,
You
how
have to
many
be
times
vulnerable.
how many times have you said and heard me say, "Okay, I have no idea where this is going. This is literally just coming out of my brain as it's coming out of my mouth with no guarantees."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you got to get it out there. Sometimes it's to get it out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's some good stuff in there, but it is like exercise, right? Like
Yeah.
your second set sometimes is going to be the good one because your muscles are like, okay,
Let's see what
now
we're
we know what
doing
that's
here.
going to feel like.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. I've been doing that too lately with just my own design process and starting. Just know, like, there might be things I know can't be done, but just put it out. Like, just get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
all right, well let's go wrap it up, and guess what? Tomorrow is a fresh start.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other
Cannot
thing. You
wait.
gotta yeah, let's have patience. Let's start again tomorrow and go for great. Make it better.
Oh my
Love
gosh.
it. Let it
It's a
rip.
new day.
Let her rip. Skip the baloney.
Oh my god. Oh boy.
All right, thank you guys.
Yeah.
This was
Thanks,
it's
Tracey.
always so much fun talking to you and love hearing about your journey. Super proud of you for starting DEEO
Thanks.
and just love every opportunity we get to work together.
Same.
Burning question really is if you hire someone down the road, will you change the name to Trio? But we'll leave that for the next podcast.
Yeah. That's a good follow.
Until then, thank you guys
Thanks, Tracey.
so
you.
much.
Talk soon.